Hey everybody, Nigel with you, Nigel's Modelling Bench. Welcome back to the channel, and here we are now with part 5 of the build of the Scammell Commander from HobbyBoss, or almost said Takum then. Just been doing some replies on the Takum Apache. 85527 is the kit number. Lovely little kit, a few little issues, but I'm covering them all in this video. People are helping me with some tips and advice. The first to come along was Peter Field, and he came along with some issues in the instructions, and then Peter Roberts has come on with some other issues as well. And if you look at part 2, you will see a comment in there from Peter Roberts talking about some issues with the winch, some issues with the front bumper, and some issues with the front suspension. So the main issue with the front suspension, and I want to see if anyone can spot this. I'm not going to mention it for 10 minutes. So what we now, I'm going to, in 10 minutes time, I will tell you what is different. See if you can spot it. If we look at the chassis here, where is it? Here, where we fit the front axle. Can you see what's different? And can you see where HobbyBoss have gone wrong? As I say, 10 minutes, I'll cover it. So the other thing we talked about was the front bumper, and I did mention this in part 4, but just in case you didn't see part 4, he mentioned that when you build the bumper, he built the bumper the same as I did. So basically glued this cross member here, D9, to the bumper, and then fitted it as an assembly rather than fit this in as the instructions say, because there is absolutely no location for this cross member whatsoever. And he said the trouble is it makes D9, which is this cross member, sit too high. Well, the trouble is the radiator has to go in. The radiator sits in those 2 square holes there. Well, here's the radiator. This is the front of the radiator. And you can see it has a cutout. There's a cutout here, which enables it to go over. Now, the only thing I did find was these square lugs. I just had to remove a tiny bit of plastic from the inside. As I say, I covered all this in part 4, but just in case you haven't seen it. So that will then go over there, and it fits down into those holes absolutely fine and fits over that cross member. So Peter has come back and said maybe it's his sloppy building or something. It doesn't sound like he's a sloppy builder by any stretch of the imagination, but he was saying his radiator wouldn't fit. If it doesn't go over there, just sand a bit more off the radiator, I would say. But you can see here, this cross member, it still isn't glued in place. It's free to move, so I'll probably just give it a little tweak if I have to, and glue it then when the radiator's in, perhaps clamp the radiator down solid and then glue it then. We shall see. But anyway, looking at the pictures in the Scammell Commander book, in fact I have it here, and you can see on there that that cross member is just kind of flush or just above the top of the bumper. There's another few pictures in here that show it. You can see there, like you can see here. Let's try and hold the book so you can see it. You can see there, there's the front bumper, there's that cross member, and you can see it is just above there. So the model is correct in that respect. So we've gone on and we've got a lot of painting done, and this beautiful little lot of air tanks and stuff here, you can see it all looks lovely. We did all that in part 4. I've since primed it all in black and then given it a blast with the green. Now I don't know if you can see it here, but basically what I've done is painted the green over the top, and it's almost like a shadowing. You can almost see some black in the background, and that's done on purpose. That's to give it some depth, and it kind of, rather than just looking like a blob of green plastic, it does kind of give it some depth. And it's so subtle you probably can't see it. Same here, if you look down in behind those brackets, they're black, whereas on the tops they're green. So I've gone underneath there with the green because I didn't want too much shadowing under there, under here I'm talking about. But I just wanted to get them done because they all go very close to each other like this. Okay, so I wanted to make sure I got paint down the sides of them. And also there's one of them, this one here. Yeah, this one here, I forgot to deal with those 2 holes down in there, so I've put some super glue in there, and when that's dry we'll get that trimmed and sanded, and then we'll paint it green again. So that's that done. I've also painted the wheels, as you can see. Make sure when you paint the wheels you get right in there, especially on the wheel centres. Don't just paint like that, you need to get the paint down in that way as well, because the rims sort of go back on themselves. So that's all looking good. So in part 5, as I've said at the start, what we're going to talk about is the winch. Now, another point that Peter pointed out, is that if you look at the winch assembly, which is back here, isn't it? They have you assemble the winch before the chassis, which is just crazy. You can see that you have these two side plates going together, okay, and then you have this piece here, D41, gluing in between, and this piece here, D28, gluing in between. So that's going to become like a solid structure. This is D41 and this is D28, so that's going to go in between and sort of make a box. You've got these two locating lugs on the bottom of here that go into two slots in the chassis here. Okay, so obviously with it all glued together you're not going to be able to get it apart. So what I've done is I've actually put an angle and trim back those two tabs. So you can see that what will happen now, it'll sort of clip down, and then if I want to take it off, I'll just pull it out and just lift it up a touch. In fact, we could take a bit more off of there on the height. But there we go. So that will sort of, if I can try and show you, that will sort of go down into the chassis like so. It'll sort of go down and clip into place. And then I can just lever it up a bit and pop it out should I want to. So there we go, so that's that done. And I think that was pretty much all he suggested. So let's talk about what I've done. As you can see, we have just a couple of ejector pin marks to deal with. So these two pieces here, these are F22 and F31. These are the main side frames for the winch. Now all these ejector pin marks are on the inside. I'm not sure how much of them is going to be seen, but you can see this one here is probably going to be quite obvious. On this one here, luckily that ejector pin mark was raised. There are some on there that are raised. They've also got, be very, very careful, hidden away in this little corner, there's an ejector pin there which is raised on both of them. So make sure you get that off because that's going to affect the way it fits the chassis. So make sure you get that one cut away. Got a bit of flash on there to get rid of. So so that's that. Then you've got this part here. This is D28. And as you can see, just a couple of small ones on there, you know. They weren't very deep at all, really. Half a bottle of super glue in there. And you've got these big ones on here. There's also a big sink mark. Excuse me. There's also a big sink mark in that square plate there, which I filled as well. And then got in there with a little skinny sander, a little one like this. Where is it? This is the one I'm looking for. A little 2mm one. Just got in there between the bolts and sanded it. Got it down so it sort of sits better, so it looks better than having a big sink mark in there. So that's that. This part here, K64, which is as flimsy as anything, when you cut yours off the sprue it'll probably break. You can see mine broke there. I've glued it back together. This is caused by the way it's moulded. You have an injection point here, and you have an injection point here and here. So what happens is the plastic rushes in here and runs down there. It rushes in here and runs up there. Okay, so it goes in here, runs down there, goes in here, runs up there, and then when it meets, comes together, it's kind of starting to cure, so it doesn't sort of melt together as well as this area here. It kind of remains sort of almost like two bits of blue tack, if you like. Not quite that bad, but it doesn't sort of weld together or flow together. What they'd have been better off doing would have been to put a big summit here for the plastic to run into, so it could run off to somewhere else, and then the plastic coming in behind would be fresh. So they could have put like a big ejector tab or something on there that the plastic would run into, and then the plastic that follows would be wetter, if you like, than the plastic that's just coming up to meet each other. This is a common problem for the newer modelers out there. This is a very common problem with thin, slender parts. You will find that what happens, it's like with this one here, you can see they've done exactly what I suggested here. That's probably a help to help eject it from the tool. But the plastic goes in here and it rushes up there and along there, and in here and it rushes up there and along there, and then it meets somewhere in the middle, and it often is sort of starting to cure, so you get this sort of stuck together part rather than being properly moulded together. So if you put that there, the plastic comes down here, up there, and it rushes into that area, so the plastic that's coming behind is wetter and melds together better than it just butting up at each other. But it's always an issue. Same here, you'll probably find these parts here would break because it's going in there, 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 there and there. So you probably have a dry joint there, a dry joint there. But they've put that tab in there, so it's better than what some people do. Some people would just have these three, and then you'll definitely get it break there and there. So it's all part of just moulding technology. But anyway, so we've got that done. I've built up the main winch itself. If you're going to fit a rope, I would suggest getting in here with a knife and cleaning out some material from in here, because it's a very, very tight fit over that mount there, and you can't turn it. So I've cut some plastic out of it, so now it's turnable, so I can fit a rope afterwards. On the subject of rope, if anybody can tell me, I would love to know if they have a manual or something, an operator's manual. I would love to know the routing of the cable, please, because you can basically see here, we've got the main drum, but then we've got two pulleys here sitting in front of that main drum, and then we've got a fair lead here, okay, and we've got another pulley there. So I don't know really what's going on. The thing is, the rope will come, or the I call it rope, cable will come off of the drum like this, obviously, because it has to run across and run across. So I doubt that it could go on these pulleys because it would pull off the side. So if somebody could tell me what's going on here, I'd be very interested to know, and I'd love to know the routing of the cable, please. So that would be a great help. I now found out about this lightweight cable that goes on here, and that's for drawing the main cable out. But I'd love to know what part these play in the whole thing. So if you could let me know, I'd be grateful. Thank you very much. So I guess we need to get started. I've assembled these two main boxes. That's like a hydraulic tank, I think, and that's a toolbox. Be very, very careful, like I wasn't. There are tiny little moulded on nubbins here and here that form the top part of the latch, and I just went and sanded them off because they're right next to the sprue points. So I was a little uncareful there, a bit careless. So I'll get some more parts off the sprue, get them cleaned up, and then we can assemble this winch. Okay, so as I said, got the parts off, ready to sort of do all this here down to here, and then we'll look at this afterwards because we've got photo etch bits and pieces going on here and a few bits and greeblies. So we'll get this bit done as the first stage. But if you remember, I said after 10 minutes, I'm going to let you know what the difference is. So you can have another quick look. Can you see what the difference is? Let's go back to let's go forward in the instructions, isn't it? Not back. You would think it's forward, back, but it's not, it's forward. In the kit, they have the tie rod on the front of the axle. Okay, so depending on how you build it, if you follow my method for having the steering working in part 2, then you're not going to do it this way. You're going to glue those arms to these hubs. I've looked at my Scammell book now. Peter sent me a message and said it appears the tie rod should be on the back because he's also built the Accurate Armour kit. So I started looking through this book. This is the Scammell Commander book that I showed you just now, and you can see here that clearly that tie rod goes at the back. It's not on the front, and you can see there, if you can see just above my thumb, you can see a round cylinder sticking out, and that is the brake actuator. You can see the pipe coming to it actually. So they've got it all wrong. I can also show you another picture here. Where is it, or was it further back? There is another picture. There we go. This is another one with the front axle removed, and you can only assume they would have rolled the axle out, okay, and then let it fall back. They wouldn't have turned it around. And you can see there the tie rod, sorry, right angle, this book's so awkward to hold. The tie rod is at the back. If you assume that axle has come out and laid down, the tie rod is at the back. So that to me is correct. And it looks like as well, there's the brake cylinder, the brake actuator there sticking up. So there we go. Or that might be the pintle hook. That probably is the pintle hook. But anyway, there we go. So I moved mine around. If you remember, if you look back, I actually built it. Now Peter has said that he struggles to get these arms here to fit around those cylinders. That's because the cylinders should be at the front, and when you look here, they get you to put the axle together with the tie rod at the front, and then you turn it over and they get you to put the wheels on with the actuators at the back. It should all be the other way around. So what I did, if you've done yours already and you want to change it around and you've got the steering working or not, what I did was picked up the center of these swivels here on the top. So that's the swivel there, okay, that I'm pointing to now. The actual part that's glued to here, in fact I'll tell you the kit part number, it's H62. H62 is this part number here, which is on the top of the axle. So that part there, H62, and what I did was picked up the center and then I drilled down with progressively bigger drills until I got to 1.5, and I drilled it out to 1.5, and that is the size of the pin on the axle. This locating pin on the axle here is 1.5mm diameter. So I drilled that out 1.5, and then I was able to pop leaving the plastic pivot on the bottom, I was able to pop that arm off. I pulled my little rings off of here, so I was able to remove these arms from these arms. So I had to remove that arm from that arm. Okay, so I was able to do that. And then I literally just popped them off, turned it all around, so the actuators are at the front, the trailing arm, the tie rod's at the back, and then put it back with a piece of 1.5 brass rod, pressed it down into the axle, and we've once again got a pivot. And if anything, it's nice and tight now. It's a lot tighter, because before it had a little bit of play in it, but if you look now, we have no play in the wheels, and there was always the risk that the thing was going to sit down with its wheels, you know, not towed out at the bottom, but with negative camber. But now they sit nice and vertical, so that's cool. The other thing you can do, of course, is when you come to fit your wheels, where are my wheels? Here they are. When you come to fit your wheels, if you do find, exaggerated, if you find that your wheel is sort of like that, what you can do is just remove plastic from that bore, get it so that you can actually fit it on vertical, and then just super glue it in place with a couple of blocks holding it. And because the wheel can't turn anyway, it can steer but it can't physically turn. So but there we go. So happy with all that, all gone together beautifully. And thank you, Peter, for raising. I didn't spot it, but Peter did, so thank you for that, mate. So I've got Peter Field and Peter Roberts is, I think, helping me with this, so thank you very much for your bits of advice. So you guys can thank them as well in the comments below. So right, moving on, this winch. So we've got this part here going together. You've got these two pulleys on these two parts here going together, and then these two parts H14 going down into D41, and that's the assembly there. So you can see that. So you've got two pulleys, the uprights, and those two parts H41 in there supported. It's a very tight fit getting all together, but it does go together very nicely indeed. Obviously I'm going to paint that before we build the winch, because I'm worried that I'm not going to be able to get in and get paint underneath those bolt heads or in those pulleys or anything, so we'll paint that before we put it together. Got this assembly here, we've got these two parts here, K25, K26, they're another pulley, and they're going to go onto the back of this part here, which is D28. I'm going to move the instructions because I know the camera whites out. So that's going that way up. I don't think it matters which way they go around because they're symmetrical. That's going to go in there like that. Now I do have one concern. We've got a tab there. So this part here, D43, is going to fit onto there. And you can see we've got a big hole there, and I think that's going to be visible. So what I'm going to do is get some extra thin into there and into there. That'll capillary along. You can see there how that glue's gone all the way along that joint. Got a shiny line. So that's gone together nicely. And I've noticed I've got an oozage there, glue oozing out. So what I'm going to do is just brush that over, just to remove that and then not squeeze it. Okay, and then what I'm going to do is I'm going to put some super glue in that hole, this one here, and fill it. Now these two here, they're going to be hidden because it's going to go that way up, and you're not going to physically see those down in there, I don't think. So I don't know how they're going to look anyway. Let's have a look. Oh, they're nice. They're much nicer. They're nice and flat. and there's a little bit of a spoon nib on there which is going to look unsightly, so we'll just sand that off. But I'm going to let that go off for a couple of minutes, put some super glue in that gap, sand it out, and then I'll be back. Okay, so got that done. I've just had a look at the Accurate Armour instructions which you can download on Scalemates, and I've noticed there's a hole in this piece here. This is D41, and it does look like the cable, the drum sits here, it looks like the cable comes off of here, it goes onto here, which is called the pay-on roller. It's going to go down and around and out of this one and then out, and I'm assuming it's going to go over that one and down through there. I really don't know. Or is it just going to come straight through? We'll see how these pulleys will come out in relation to each other. So I've done that super glue in there, sanded that, so we've got a nice flat joint now. So we can put this together, and just on the bottom edge we'll put some extra thin there, and let that capillary up and do its thing. And then that's that done. And then these little tabs on the back here, as I say, you can hardly see them, but I think we will just give them a gentle scrape just to get them flush. I may actually put some Mr. Surfacer in there just to sort of soften up the hard edge so it makes it less noticeable, but I don't think you're going to see in there anyway. But I have yet to find out about these cables. So what we're doing next. So we've got this all assembled. I'm not going to fit this piece yet until I've got the cable on, because that kind of goes in there, goes in like that, and that's just going to sit there above the drum, and obviously when I come to put the cable on it's going to be very easy to break, so I'm going to leave that off until I've got the cable on. And obviously I don't know which way the cable goes, so until you guys help me out or I can find some reference material, then I'm stuck. So this is all going together now. So that's that side there, so that's going to sit on there, that's going to sit in there like that, this is going to sit in here. That's strange, because when I put that in there, that cable, that pulley there is touching the main winch drum, which is a little strange. Yeah, they're showing it wrong here. They're showing there's an error in the instructions. They're showing this piece here as butting onto there, and it doesn't. It doesn't butt onto there. That goes lower down. Or is that sitting in there like that? Okay, I've got that too far forward, so that sits in there. So it has no positive location really. That's a bit crap, isn't it? And that's going to go in like that. So is this wider than that? Yes, it is. So that's going to go in there. Make sure you get that the right way up. I've got it the wrong way up. So that's going to sit in there, and that's going to sit on that top edge. It's got two little pins on there. There's two tiny little pins, you can probably just see them. God only knows what they're for. So that's going to sit in there, and that's going to glue on it. I need to work this out. There we are, guys. So on the top here we've got a toolbox, or a tank, or whatever it is. I think it's a toolbox. So that's sitting there, and you can see I've got this all clamped together. I also noticed in the Accurate Armour instructions they suggested building the winch on the chassis, and I tell you what, it wouldn't be a bad idea here too, because I found when it was all dry fitted together it wasn't going very well on the chassis. It was all a bit too wide, and then when I got it to go in, it also clicked into place, and it's all become very, very nice. And the other thing is, the bottom of this Fairlead roller plate here, that's sitting on that chassis rail, so if you get that too low and glue it in, your winch is not going to go together. Now obviously, because of all the little shapes and nooks and crannies here, I want to get some painting done, I think, before I put it all together. I think I'm going to paint inside here black and then green, so that we don't have to go overloading it with paint. But you can see how it's all going together there, and that's interesting. That piece there, that's called the spring, that's actually sitting on an angle. That means those two holes, it looks like those two holes need moving over. So that's interesting. Or maybe just move that one over. Or is it because it's gone in too far on one side? It's a very, very flimsy little part, so be very careful with it. I'm not quite sure what's going on here, but it doesn't look right. Yeah, it's still, you can see it's over on an angle. We need to move those holes over to allow it to sit straight, because that looks horrible, doesn't it? It just looks awkward. It's over on an angle. So I will get that done. I mean, that plate can't move over, so it's the holes that are in the wrong place. Anyway, so if we take this clamp off, I hold it all together. In fact, I'm going to turn it over so that piece falls out, and it won't fall out. I don't want that getting broken again. You can see that it fits on the chassis, lovely, you can pick it up, but there it is. It's not the easiest to build, guys. This piece here has got a positive location there, and it's got a positive location in here. You can see there's a slot for it to go in, and that's just going to go in there like that. So that's easy enough, but the rest of it, whew, no way. So those two holes, you can see they're over too far to the left. If I hold this in between that drum, you can see those holes are that way. So we're going to have to fill those holes in and move them over. Well, I'll move them over and then fill in the old ones, I guess. Or just, well, probably the best thing to do is put some rod in there. So I'll put some plastic rod in there with some super glue, and then we can sand it nice and flat, and then we can cut two new holes next to it. So here we are then, guys. Got the two holes there. A little bit of one for the beginners here, for the newbies. Just dip my plastic rod, a piece of 20 by 30. Just dip that in the super glue, put it in, push it right through so you've got something to sand either side. And then that one there, dip that one in the super glue, get a nice blob of super glue on the end of it. Just push it into the hole, just like so. Make sure it comes through, as I say, on the other side, and then pull it back out with your finger. And there we are. My finger's obviously stickier than the super glue. So I think one of the problems with this black super glue, it's good in a lot of ways, but sometimes it's a bit of a pain, is that it doesn't dry very fast. But that's good for a lot of applications, because quite often super glue's a pain because it dries so fast. So we just put a couple of blobs on either side, that'll capillary around into the gap. Just like so. To make sure it's nice and solid in there. And then we can get our activator. I'll just use the end of the tube just to capillary some down onto it. And then it should go off. I should have done the other side as well, shouldn't I? I don't think it'll work right through it. It probably does, but I'm not sure. Before I pour the bottle over myself, just put a drop in there, drop in there. Excuse me. The cold is finally on its way, it would appear. So we cut that off, cut that off, cut that off, and cut that off. And then just let that glue sort itself out. Even with the accelerator, it takes longer to dry than the clear stuff. So bear that in mind. You can see there it's still wet. So I'll leave that for 10 minutes and then I'll just sand it back and then we'll look at replacing those holes. Alright, so I've sanded that back. That's all nice and dry now, as you can see. We've got those holes plugged. So we've got to come this way. So we're going to put a hole, make a mark just next to where that hole was. And we'll do the same here, just next to where that hole was. We could do all measurements if you want to, but I can't be bothered. So I've got here a 0.6 drill. So I'm just going to drill through there. In fact, we don't even need to go right through, do we? Although it doesn't matter because you can't see behind there. It's a closed off panel, isn't it? So we will go right through. Okay, so I've measured the part that's going in there, and it's like 0.8 by 0.6. So I reckon if we drill that about 0.9, it doesn't need to be a square rod because by the time you glue it in, it's all going to be welding together anyway. There we go. So we can sand that out. And we can see how it looks now. So we can put the drum in there. Put that piece in there. I'm not sure it's going to want to stay there. The drum doesn't even want to stay there. Look. So we can hold that piece in there and then we can grab this little part and then put it into our... In fact, what we should do is test if it's actually going to fit our new holes. There we go, that's lovely. So we can hold that drum in there. Blimey, this is awkward. Hold that drum in. God, stay on there, for God's sake, go on. And then push that up into there. Oh, it doesn't want to stay together. This is so... I'm going to clamp it all together and then we'll look, see how it looks. Lo and behold, got it together, and it's too far the other way now. As you can see, it's off like this now rather than off like that. So I need to plug those holes and re-drill them in between the two. There we go, finally we got there, and it's square. So basically what I've done, I'll take it apart so you can see what I've done. There you go. It shows how easy it comes apart. What I've done is, you can see where the old square hole was. You can see where the old square hole was. Come on, focus on me, not the bloody... It's focused on this Red Fox badge. Oh, come on. Okay, so change the settings. Oh. There you go. You can see you have the square hole there that was originally there. You can see there's a white hole. You can see the plastic in there. And these are straight down the middle. So there we go, 0.9. That's that done. So yeah, what you need to do is, if you're going to do this, fill those square holes up, and then when you see the line around the square hole, just drill a 0.9 hole on the edge of that square hole and you'll be fine. It'll square it all up. I don't think I've done anything wrong. I don't think you can do anything wrong. So what I'm going to do is just... What's happened there? Looks like there's a nick in the top of it. Something go in there? I'm noticing on this kit from time to time, I noticed on this drum there's like a flat spot there, and it's not where I've sanded it. That's not where I've sanded it, so there's a flat spot there. In fact, what I'm going to do is go around that with a stick just to take that flat spot off, because it looks horrible. So anyway, right, so I'm going to get the insides of these parts painted. It's not square there, is it? Where's my rule? Where has my rule gone? There we go. Parts all painted, as you can see. Got that little piece there I haven't done yet. But on the whole, all looking good. One thing I did do on here, I went in with a file and just opened this up a bit, because if you look on the bottom one, you can see there on that lower pulley, it's not very nicely moulded. So I've just opened it up a bit to give it more of a sort of a V shape than it was. That you can see that one there is quite nice, but the actual that one there is not very nice at all. So open those up a bit. So we can start looking at getting this together now. So what I'm going to do is come in here, and we can see where that's going to fit. So we can remove some paint from here. That'll make it a better joint. So that's going to go together like that. So we can make sure we don't have our finger over the back, because the glue will capillary through that hole and onto our fingers. So we can get some glue into there. Get that stuck together. There we go. So that's that done. I'm also going to remove some paint from here. And I'm going to remove some paint from here. So that's that. We've got our pulley over here. So that's going to sit in there like that. And we're going to have that. We're not going to glue that in because we're going to be able to turn it and put a rope on. And then we're going to remove some paint from here. And then my plan is to get this together like so, but I'm not going to glue this end. That's gone in there, that's all good, that's all good, it's all together down the bottom there. Right, and what I'm going to do, as suggested by Accurate Armour in their instructions, is actually have this together on the chassis. And that'll make sure, because obviously it can go like that, it can go like this, it can do all sorts. So if we put it together on the chassis, I can find the bloody hole. That's gone in there now, and then that side will clip in as well. We can make sure everything's nice and square. And then we can take our clamp and clamp it together. Just like so. With it fitted into the chassis, all nice and square, and let that glue harden in that frontal area. And I'm just going to put a drop more in there. No, not, because it might capillary out onto those clamps, and that'll make a proper mess. So we'll let that dry for half an hour. Seems to be the story of my life. And then if you notice, I haven't glued that end so that I can slide this piece up in after. So all looking good, and you can see now where I drilled those holes, and that's all disappeared underneath the primer. So, and that tank there is going, that box is going to sit on the top, so that's going to give us our top spacing is correct. So that's good. So there we are. So we'll let that dry, and then we should have a good enough base with it glued together to finish off the winch. Okay, so I've taken it off again, fitted that plate, just slid it up in, and then I've got it back on the chassis and reclamped. So that plate is not glued in. You can see it's still movable. I can move it all about. And what I want to do now is just glue this piece here, which is on a diagonal. I just want to glue that in to get some rigidity into this framework, and then once that's glued and dried, we can start to look at getting this panel in position. I want to get it roughly in the right place, because some of the glue may have touched it, but here we go. So I'm just going to push that up on one side. It's gone a little bit lopsided. I just want to make sure it's roughly in the right place, just in case some of that glue's touched it. But there we go. So we can leave that now to dry once again. I'm going to keep checking this toolbox on the top, because we've got these two holes that go onto these two pins on the top here. So as long as that just drops on there, then we know we're good, and that just drops on that. So we know that, you know, everything's the correct distance apart and everything's good. There we are. So that's that gone in. So again, like I said, I'm going to leave that to dry, and then we'll take it off, get that plate positioned, get it back on the chassis and clamp it for the glue to dry. And I think the suggestion from Accurate Armour, I keep calling them Accurate Miniatures, Accurate Armour, to do all this on the chassis was a good one, because you can make sure it all stays square and everything. Right, I'm not going to lie, I'm having a nightmare with this. I had this on the chassis, as you know, to get all this glue together. What I didn't realise is it was sat on the chassis and one side was up, so although it was square, it was actually like this. So this piece here wasn't square with the rest of the assembly. Now on the back of that piece, I can't show you now because I've glued it on, but you can see here there are two little tabs on the back that go into two little slots, and I've got a feeling those slots are out of position, and they've made it, and that's what's made it go out of shape, because I've removed them and I just put it straight on the flats, and it's lovely. As you can see here, I've got a bit of a gap where the glue had worked, so I've had to fill that with some super glue, so we'll let that dry and then sand it back. But I've now got it clamped to this block, so it's held together with this one obviously and held down with this one. So now that it can dry with it nice and square. This piece here is still floating around, this bit here with the, it's hard to see because it's all black, but this bit here with the fair lead on, that's still loose, that's not glued in yet. We'll get that glued in when this is all done and I've dealt with that seam. But yeah, what a nightmare. And the fact that this has low location I think is ridiculous. If they'd have put some location on this, on the sides, it could have had a couple of pins or a couple of slots. We could have put that in and that would have made it all square. You couldn't possibly build it out of line like that then. But anyway, we got there in the end. I've also done this little bit here, which is this part of the instructions here. Little piece of PE, A18, and then this button goes on here, K76. So that's a nice, pretty little job you can see there. So that's all good. So we've got to let that dry. So what I'm going to do is to carry on and do something else. I'm going to get these brackets and stuff glued to the exhaust so they can all dry. I think then we're going to make these pieces of PE up, and this is going to involve some soldering. So I think I'll do another beginner's video on soldering with PE. And also need to get this lot built up here. So I'm going to get these brackets off, get these exhausts out, which I assembled previously. Remember what I said about planning your build, you know, do your halves and everything, and then you get them done. And they are, in fact, in a little bag here. There they are. They're all done. So they're done, all sanded down and ready to go. So I'll get these bits off the sprue and then we'll get them glued on. Right, so we've got all the parts off here to do this bit up here, and then we've got some PE to go on as well. Now we've got these brackets here, H67, and what they do, they go on here. I can't remember if it's the front or the back. They go on here on the back. They go like that, and then the exhausts, the mufflers, well, the silencers, will go together like that. I'm not going to fit them yet. I'm only going to fit them to one side because I want to get some rust effects going on here. I'll show you how to do that. I may do it as a beginner's video. But what we must remember is when we look at these, you can see you've got a cutout here for this part to go into, and it goes in there. And when it goes in, this central part here is part of the exhaust, so that's going to be rusty as well. Okay, so we're going to make sure we get that all sort of sealed in so it looks nice. So I'm going to glue these into one side, and then what I think we'll have to do is do some rust effects on the inside faces and then glue them together, because otherwise we can't deal with that. It's going to look like it's glued on, and I'm not sure how visible it's going to be on the finished article. So they're on the back there and they're covered by that piece of PE, so it's actually not so bad because those brackets there are on the back and then this piece of PE is going over the back, so actually they won't be visible They're not too visible anyway. So what we'll do is we'll glue them to one side. The other thing I've done is when you look at the exhaust pipe, it's slide moulded, so it's got a lovely hole in the end and everything, which is all very nice. But we can actually, really important to get these seams sorted on these, because you do not want seams on your exhaust. But we can actually make them look a lot better. You can see I've done one, so you can see one looks a lot more accurate than the other. So all I'm doing, I've got a 2mm drill, and I'm going and making sure I'm straight that way, and I'm going on roughly to get it so I can just deepen the curve. Just push that drill into there, get it to go in just to deepen that hole, just like so. Okay, you need to be careful because sometimes you've got a thick piece of plastic like this, there might be a void in the middle, and when you drill, the drill will suddenly pick up in that void and it'll pull the drill in, and it'll often pull it off to one side as well. So that's what's starting to happen there. I can feel the drill, it's like slightest amount of pressure and it digs in, so there's probably a void in there. So in fact, I can see down in there, there is a void. There's like a little, I doubt very much you can see it, but I can see a hole in the middle, like about 1mm diameter. So be careful of that. And then with this, I think this is called a tulip burr, just go in and just remove plastic from the edges until you can thin the edge right out. Now I can see here that this hole is moulded off centre. I noticed that earlier. So what I'm going to do is just with the knife, is just come in and scrape that out. If you don't have these burrs, if you put in burr, B-U-R-S, in Amazon, you get loads of sets of them. You don't need expensive ones, just get the cheap ones. If all you're doing is plastic. And then there we go, and you can get all sorts of different shapes and sizes. And then just to add a little bit of an edge to it, just go over slightly with a sanding sponge, and that'll just sort of just put an edge on it. So you can see now we've got a pair of exhausts that look very realistic, and when that's painted down in there matte black, it will look completely hollow. So there we go. So these are going to go on like that. So they're a lovely fit in there. So that's gone in there, and then that one's going to go in like that. Just going to drop more on that one because the brush wasn't very wet when I did that one. There we go. So we can put them together and make sure they look the same. They're vertical and everything's good. There we go. And the other thing is, when you've done any work like that, if you get some extra thin and just brush around where you've been drilling or grinding or whatever, it just takes away any rough surface. And I can also see on here that we've still got remains of a mould seam, which we really do not want on there. And we can also, with our extra thin, brush over that, and that will help to get rid of any mould seam that's remaining or any sanding marks or whatever. Although on here it doesn't really matter because we're going to make it rusty. There we go, so that's that done. Right, so now there is no left and right, they're the same, so we can put these brackets on. So I can see I've got a bit of a sprue nib left on there, just get rid of that. So these brackets are going to go on, they go on this back side. So I'm going to put a drop of extra thin in there, too much on there. Give that a little shove, make sure it's square. You can see by looking at the roll to get it square. There we go. Tron was actually asking me in one of the videos, I think it was one of the beginners videos, he said, I see you picking up the glue and you come over the model, you know, what's the risk of glue dripping off the brush? What I do with my Tamiya extra thin, I never have it much higher than about 10mm. I have it so the brush is just in the glue. When they're new and they're filled right up to the top, what can tend to happen, you can pick the brush up and there'll be this whole area will be dripping wet, and you will get drips coming off, and you can guarantee if it's going to drip, it'll drip on your model. It won't drip anywhere where it doesn't matter, it will drip where it matters. So bear that in mind. But it was a good question that Tron asked. Well, Tron always asks good questions, to be honest. Get that on there, and I want to get this one on here a bit quickly. And what we can do is check them against the other muffler. Oops, wrong way round. Not bad. Just going to brush down there with some cement. Then we can check that they're flat. Everything is square. We can check that that one's going to sit in there. Yeah, they all line up lovely, so that's cool. There we go. So that's that done. Now, as I say, I'm not going to glue them on. It doesn't really matter because they're going to get covered up by this photo etch panel here, which, as you can see on here, is quite big. It's that one there, and you can see it's the same size as the silencers, so as the mufflers. Silencers, it's British, isn't it? It's a British lorry, not an American truck. So now we can look at getting these brackets on the front. So we need to be careful here because they're handed. So that's going to be that side. So this, what I've done here is this side here. So that's going to be the A35s. The A35s and the A34s. A35s have a little flange on the side with a pin on. The A34s are just plain on both ends. So they're not handed, are they? They're the same on both ends. So this one is going to get that one. So that can go on there. And then this one is going to go on here. And sit to the outside. There we go. I'm going to make sure these are all sort of parallel and correctly on centre. Because we've got brackets and stuff to go on there, so we need to make sure they're pretty good. So I'm not exactly sure what these are going to do. But there's going to be photo etch going on these, so we need to make sure these are sort of square to the centre, so they're sort of perpendicular to the centre line. So I'll get the rest of these glued on and I'll come back and show you how it looks. Okay, so there we go. They're all built up, having all the brackets on and all looking nice. Looking through the instructions here, this is, I don't know what's going on with manual. I think I'm going to make a fresh video about this because there's something going on with these manufacturers that they seem to be sort of moving away from the simple aspects of model making. It's like, you know, there's no location for this part here to go in there. This part was made off centre. You know, it's just lots and lots of silly little things. As I say, I think the tabs on there are out of line, which pushes all this out of line. But here we've got these brackets going on here, and what they're telling you to do is put these brackets on here and basically glue those silencers together. Okay, so they're going to be, so if you follow the instructions, you're going to have this like assembly here, and then they're telling you to bend up these pieces of PE and glue them in. Well, here's those pieces of PE here, and I'm going to make a video about these, about rolling and soldering brass, and I can't see how you're going to get them in because they're wider at the end than the gap is in the middle. I mean, they may go in and twist down, I don't know, but so they're going to go in, and there's no real positive location for them fore and aft, so you just got to imagine they're going to be sort of somewhere in the middle. and it looks like they're going to sit on top of these brackets. So they're going to glue down on top of those brackets there. And then when you come in, you've got F30 and F28. It's just, I mean, look at that. You've got F30 opposite F28. Where are they going? And it looks like they're going onto the bottom of those brackets that you've just put in there. But I can't be too sure. So I'm looking at parts F30 and F28, which are here. And they've got some little holes in there, but they're for something else to go on. So there's no location for them either. But looking at it, it looks like, you know, if they've got an arrow going from that piece there on the top, if we put it like this on the silencer, we can see that they line up there. So it looks like this is going to glue to the ends of that, as is the other end. So they are like the mountings for the silencer. But for God's sake, come on guys, you could have made it a lot better than this. You could have... Why have you made those out of PE? They don't need to be made out of PE. They could have been made out of plastic. They could have had a hole in the side of the silencer. They could have had a pin on the side of there. They could have glued into the side of the silencer, glued onto there, and then you'd have the silencer held solidly with a piece of plastic rather than this piece of PE. That is going to be a bloody nightmare. Because as I say, there's no positive location fore and aft. And it's all going to be plastic and PE, and all this has got PE brackets going on here on top of these plastic brackets, which are, these are absolutely fine. I don't know why they couldn't make them out of plastic. And then you've got these bits of PE and these grills and everything are going to go onto the PE, which is mounted to the plaza. It's like, oh god. So it's going to look very nice, I think. It's all going to look very nicely to scale, but touch it, it's going to fall apart, I think. So anyway, I'm going to call that a day for this video, because basically I've had enough. You know, with this and that Apache I've just done, it's just like, what are these manufacturers doing? What is going on here? You know, the poorest quality of the instructions, the missing parts, the parts that are missing in the kit, no Scammell nameplate, no spare wheel. It's all on the box front, but it's not in the kit. And yeah, it's just, I don't know. It could be better, couldn't it? It could be better. Anyway, we'll call it a day there, guys. That's been about an hour, and I'll see you all soon for part 6. I think it'll be. This is part 5, isn't it? In the meantime, I'm going to do videos on how to make rusty exhausts in my beginner series, and I'm going to do a video on how to bend and roll and bend and solder PE. So I'll see you for those 2, and then we'll see you back here for part 6, where we'll have the exhaust done and the PE done. Thanks for watching. Bye for now. Take care. Happy modelling. Look after yourselves and stay safe.